Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the new kind of canner that's out there as an option for you. It's not one that you have to take. This is our traditional boiling water canner. It's deep. You put the water in it. You put the water in so that it goes at least an inch over the top of the jars. Bring it to a boil, have your jars in there, and so on. And most people are familiar with that one if they've done some home canning. This one, however, is called a steam canner, or more accurately, an atmospheric steam canner. And they've also been around for a while, but USDA hasn't given us information or guidance on them because the research wasn't done until just last year that they were willing to give us some guidance on how to help consumers use them. So you notice the difference. We have this one is very deep. The jars go underneath so that they're going to be at the boiling point of water. It's going to be very consistent. It's going to be heated from all sides with each of the jars. This one, you notice, is different. You have a small base. Water goes in it. There's also a rack in here. The water goes just over the rack. They will hold the same number of jars. This one will hold 7-quart jars, 8-pint jars. Same here. The difference, however, are a little bit on how you go about processing it. Because you can't have air trapped inside of a canner, which doesn't happen in a boiling water canner because the jars are submerged. But in a container like this, where you have a big dome lid, if you have air trapped inside the canner lid, the temperature inside there is going to be lower and your food is going to be under-processed, hence unsafe. So the canners are designed with at least one, depending on which brand you get, at least one, sometimes two, even three of these little vent holes. And as you heat the canner up and bring the water to a boil, you need to, you'll have the jars inside there at this point, but you need to let that vent out with a steady stream somewhere around the sides of the canner and or out that vent port until you get a stream that's steady and at least 8 to 10 inches long. You're going to find some spurting, but as steady you can get it, the better you're going to be. Canners themselves are different once you get that steady spurt coming out. Some have a thermometer built in them so that you can monitor, some don't. But let's look a little bit more about what's going on inside here. First of all, you're going to use the same kinds of jars and the same kinds of lids. So you're going to use jars that are made for home canning. You're going to use 2-piece lids like these. Doesn't matter which brand you're using as long as they're the 2-piece lids. The same things you would use for boiling water canner or pressure canner. The other thing that's important with this one is that it's not very deep, so that you can't do anything that's going to take longer than 45 minutes to process, which means tomatoes, which would normally go in a boiling water canner, can't be done in here because the processing time may be 80 minutes, 85 minutes, and it's simply too long. Probably more important is the fact that you can only use this for things that you would normally put in a boiling water canner. So they have to be fairly high in acid with a pH of 4.6 or less. And then you need to find the directions from the same kinds of sources, such as the National Center for Home Food Preservation, that you would use if you were using a boiling water canner. The processing times will be the same. You also have to adjust for altitude, just like you do with this kind of canner. The advantage to them is that you don't have as much water to heat up. So just like you do with a boiling water canner, you're going to heat the water up to 140 degrees if you're going to raw pack, 180 degrees if you're going to hot pack. So you'll need a thermometer to take care of that. Once the water is at the temperature, you work quickly because making sure that the food that you're putting into the jars, the liquid that you're pouring over the jars, is already as close to the same time as possible is very important when you're doing this. Jars go in, you're going to put the lid over it and turn it on high heat until you get it so that the steam is coming out so that you get it vented. Once you get it vented, then if you have one that has a thermometer in it, such as this one will adjust for altitude, and what the goal is, there's just a sensor underneath the lid, and you look and when for your altitude it goes into the green mark, then you start your timer. Once it's at that point, you can turn it down because you don't want it to boil really rapidly. It will boil dry within 20 minutes if you leave it on high. Once it boils dry, because you can't open it and add more water like you could with a boiling water canner, once it boils dry, you have to consider that food under-processed and no longer safe. So it's important that you turn that temperature down a little bit. If you don't have a thermometer in it, remember that you have these little portholes. These you can stick a thermometer in, so you can make sure that the temperature is somewhere between 210 to 212, depending on the altitude that you're at. Will lower the temperature the higher in altitude you go. And then you make sure that you adjust the processing time based on altitude, just the way you do with the boiling water canner or a pressure canner. So key points here, these are usable for things that are low in acid. You do need to make adjustments, just like you do with other kinds of canners for altitude. As far as processing time is concerned, you need to make sure you know how to use them, read the directions very carefully. However, don't rely real heavily for processing times on the booklets that come with these appliances, because they may not be up to date or current or match those with USDA. So again, it's another option. If you already have this one, the question becomes, how much space do I have, or am I going to get rid of one? So there's always that question when you're getting large pieces of where are they going to go now, and will you be able to remember where you put them, and will they be easy enough to get back out? If you're interested in them, you can find them online. You may be able to find them in some of the hardware stores that are in Oklahoma this year, or you may know somebody who had one who never really got much use out of it in the past, and you're willing to give it a try. Something new, always good to know what you're looking at when there is something new out there. So for Oklahoma Gardening, I'm Barbara Brown.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.